Hi again, this is Simon, BritSimon. I wanted to talk to DV2021 winners. The DV announcement was only yesterday, and so already people are going through the process and getting very excited, and it's perfectly natural, it's understandable. I remember exactly what this was like some years ago, but I did want to just talk to you today to try and slow you down a little bit. This is a long process, and it's very natural to think, okay, I won the DV lottery yesterday, I better go and start packing my bags. It doesn't work like that. There are some things that you need to do first, there's some processes that you need to go through, but also it makes sense to take your time a little bit and make sure you don't make mistakes along the way. This really is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and if you're serious about this, you'll take a little bit of time to figure out what you should be doing and make sure you don't make any mistakes along the way. Okay, so I promised before that I was going to talk about a couple of things that you should be doing, and I'm going to talk in this video about, at high level at least, the order of things that you're going to be doing, and I'm going to be giving links in the notes below to some articles and videos that will help you with some of these high level steps that you're going to be taking. So I'm going to explain the steps that you're going to be taking, and then explain what the concerns would be at each of those steps, and then refer you to more information below. Okay? So first thing, before you do anything, certainly before you file your DS260, you need to make sure that you didn't make any mistakes during the entry period. This is absolutely critical. There are a couple of mistakes that you could have made already that would already have killed your case. It's important to understand that filing the DS260 is known as a declaration of intent to immigrate. In other words, you're telling the US government that given an opportunity you would emigrate to the USA. That intention or that declaration can cause you problems if you don't get this green card. It can cause you problems later for future non-immigrant visa applications. And so you really need to make sure that you are going to file and be successful before you go ahead and file the DS260. The DS260 is an application for immigration benefits. In other words, it's an application to apply to become an immigrant. So in the future, if you apply, for example, a B1, B2 visa, one of the issues you have is that the CO is always going to be suspicious that you won't follow the rules and that you'll somehow try and overstay your visa. And one of the factors that they could take into account, not the only factor, but one of the factors is, number one, ties to your homeland. How likely are you to return for family, friends, a house, a job, or whatever that you have there? But also your previous history in terms of applications you made on, immigrant visas. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. So let's talk about the application and the most critical mistakes that you may already have made that would sink your application right now. First one, it is absolutely categorically clear that if you left off a derivative, either a spouse or a child that you had at the time of entry, if you did not include those derivatives in your application, you will be disqualified in this process. That's 100% certain. There is no fix for it, so you need to pay attention to this point. So, in the past, people have told me, oh, I didn't include my daughter, she was at college, I couldn't get a photo, it doesn't matter. Whatever the reason, whatever the excuse, the application process is quite clear that you cannot leave derivatives, eligible derivatives, off of your initial entry into the lottery. You can't edit your initial entry into the lottery now, and so even though you've been selected, if you had left off a child that you should have included, or if you left off a spouse that you should have included, for whatever reason, you will be disqualified later. And the only way that you could proceed with your application, therefore, is by committing immigration fraud by continuing to pretend that you don't have this spouse or this child, and that will come back to haunt you one way or the other, either in the application itself, or if you later try and apply for citizenship, at some point it will come back to haunt you, and you could literally be deported later on, even if you manage to fraudulently get approved through the DV lottery process. So frankly, if you've already made that mistake, you may as well stop now. That's my first thing. So leaving someone off of the initial entry, that's the biggest simple mistake, or the biggest mistake you could have made. Conversely, the rules have been clarified recently to include as a serious error including someone on your original entry that you were not entitled to include. So if you included a child that you haven't legally adopted, if you included a spouse that you're not legally married to because you were planning to get married just after the lottery entry or whatever, again, those things can cause problems. They're not quite as serious. They don't cause absolute automatic disqualification, as in the case of leaving someone off. At least in the past they didn't cause automatic disqualification, but the rules were firmed up, or the description of the rules were firmed up about a year ago, and it's now more likely than before, that you would be disqualified if you've done that, if you've included someone on your application that you shouldn't have included for whatever reason. And again, excuses are not important. This is a legal process. Your excuses are not interesting or important to anybody. You have to follow the process, right? I hope you're understanding that. Okay, let's talk about the next big problem that you may already have done. A lot of people misunderstand the concept of the country of chargeability. There are various reasons why people do this, but sometimes people say, well, okay, I was born in, let's say, I was born in South Africa, but I was living in France at the time that I applied for the lottery, so I entered my chargeability as France. Right? That's wrong. You'll be disqualified. Or I have a passport from France, and so my nationality therefore now is France, even though I was born in South Africa. I'm sorry, you've already made a mistake. That's going to get you disqualified. Essentially, you can make country mistakes on your country of chargeability if the two countries concerned are in the same region. So for example, if you were born in Ghana but you list South Africa for whatever reason as your country of eligibility, because both of those countries are in the region of Africa, that mistake can be forgiven by the CO. They may forgive, and they normally forgive that sort of mistake. If on the other hand the two countries involved cross regions, one is in Africa, one's in EU, or one's in Asia, etc., then the CO has no discretion about that and has to disqualify your case. Alright? Now there are a couple of exceptions, and I've got a detailed article that describes the exceptions where you might have used a country other than your country of birth for the country of chargeability. But if you know that your country is in the Asia region, for example, and you see that you've got a case number that starts 2021 OC, you're in Oceania region, or 2021 EU, then there's clearly a problem with your application. You screwed up somehow, putting it bluntly. You've made a mistake at the time of entry, and you need to stop now and ask me on my blog about your particular scenario, in order to avoid you making an expensive mistake by proceeding, frankly. So there are some ways that you can get around that in certain circumstances, as I say, within the same region, or based on the person you're married to, and in some circumstances by country of birth of one of your parents. But those are very specific exclusions that need to be clarified. And so if you've done something like this, if your country of eligibility is something other than your country of birth, then you need to stop right now and ask me a question on my blog about your particular scenario. Okay? Okay, those are the two main problems that you may have made or the two categories of problems that you may have made on your original entry, either about including or not including someone on your entry that should have been there or shouldn't have been there, or the country of eligibility. They're the two big things. If you've made mistakes with your name, even your date of birth, or the education level that you picked in that form, none of that's really too important. Those things won't cause automatic disqualification. But you know, there are some other things which are fatal disqualifications. They're the end of your case, and there's nothing you can do about them, as I described. Okay, so that's the first thing. So, assuming that you haven't made those mistakes and you have a case number, you now need to then next think about the case number itself. Where does that case number, you know, fit in terms of whether it's a low case number or a high case number? Now, this is difficult for me to be precise about at the moment because we don't have a lot of information. What makes a high case number is, number one, numerically it's high for the region. Each of the case numbers are numbered within the region. So case number 2000 in Africa region would be extremely low. That would be one of the lowest numbers. Case number 2000 in Oceania would be quite high, right? So the numbering systems between the regions are different. They're unique to the region only. Each region starts at number 1 and counts up from there. And so you can have an Oceania case number 1, you can have an Asia case number 1, an EU case number 1, and so on. You know, you get the point. They're numbered entirely differently. So you don't compare region to region. But within the region, the lowest numbers, starting from 1, will have the right to process their application and be interviewed before a later number, right? And the numbers are released in blocks from month to month. So for example, we may see in October, we may see the visa bulletin immediately release numbers. Let's say, I'm just picking these numbers now, don't focus on these numbers as being accurate, but let's say EU numbers below 5,000, you know, it could be interviewed in October. That's possible. If you've got a low number, therefore, let's say in this case under 5,000 in EU, then you may want to submit your application, your DS260 application, quickly. But if you submit your application and get processed and interviewed in October, that will only give you until 6 months after October, or 6 months after your medical, in fact. So you'll need to move to the USA, at least for the first entry, in early 2021. Is that what you want? Or are you at school? Are you studying at college or something? Do you want to sort of get to a certain point in your job before you move to America? You know, you need to consider your own personal circumstances and the case number you have to decide whether you want an early interview or whether you want to perhaps delay it for a little bit. If you want to delay it, then the best way is to delay your submission of your DS260. Okay, so at the other end of the scale, if you've got a number like Africa 50,000, that number is not going to be interviewed in 2020 anyway. It's going to be, you know, into next year, probably summer of next year, a year from now, before that case will be interviewed. And in that case, why on earth are you rushing to submit your DS260 this weekend or in the next couple of days? It doesn't make sense. You're better off to slow down, take your time, understand the process, and go through that carefully. Okay, so I hope that's making sense now. Now, I can't tell you at this point the high numbers and the low numbers for all the regions. I can just tell you that, for example, Oceania numbers will probably range up to about case number 3,000. South America would probably range up to 3,000 or 4,000 total numbers I'm talking about, in terms of the total range. So EU is probably going to go, I don't know, could be 40,000 or 50,000. Africa is going to be in excess of 60,000, I would imagine. Asia, I've seen Asia numbers of 35,000. So those numbers, 35,000, are probably the highest numbers. So if compared to those number ranges I just mentioned, your number is much, much lower than those, then your number could be a low case number. If, on the other hand, it's halfway through a 30,000 range, or as I mentioned in Asia, a 35,000 number range. If it's halfway through, then you may not be interviewed in 2020, it may be early next year, but it certainly isn't worth you rushing. Once again, it's not worth you rushing to submit your DS260. You're better off to take your time and make sure you don't make mistakes. I am a bit disheartened, frankly, at the number of people I've already seen who are asking me questions about which are specific to the DS260. What it means is they've rushed into the process. They're probably going to make mistakes in their DS260. They can correct those mistakes later on, but why do that? Right? Why rush only to correct it later? There is no advantage. I know the selectee letter sort of gives the impression that you've got to get up and hurry up and rush along, but most people by far are not going to see any action on their case for a year from now. So why on earth are people rushing it? It doesn't make sense. Okay, so we've talked about those things, right? The whether you should submit your DS260. I'll talk about submitting the DS260 in a moment, and how I've got some information that will help you with that. One other aspect of the requirements, by the way, that I should cover is the education or work experience requirement. The rules say that you have to have education of a certain level. It's a level that is equivalent to an American kid that goes through college here, or goes to college here. So there's a high school graduation level here. Now for an American kid, that happens at about 18 years old. They go off to what they call college. We in the UK call that university, but it starts at 18. So in other words, an American kid, when they talk about high school level education or 12 years of education, it's because an American kid will go through 12 years of education roughly up until the age of 18 before they're able to go off to college or university to sit a further degree program, a bachelor's degree or you know, something like that. Bachelor's, by the way, is a 4-year degree in the States. So that, you know, most American kids will come out of university or college, as they call it, at about age 22. Now, in different countries around the world, the equivalent age of that is going to be a little bit different. It's not important how many years you did. Doesn't matter whether you did 12 years or 11 years or 13 years. That's not the point. It's the level of education which is equivalent to the American high school graduation level. Okay, and really what that means is the point at which you're qualified to enter an American university or college with the education you've received from high school. It needs to be a general education. It can't be vocational. Vocational means it cannot be something like you train to be a plumber from age 16 to 18, because that's vocational. That training is specifically towards a vocation, a job. It's not a general education. So in every country around the world, there'll be a slightly different level that you need to have achieved. Some countries are more clear and specific about it than others. Some embassies are more clear. So you're going to need to find out what the level is in your country and be pretty sure that you meet that education standard before you submit your DS260 application, because if you don't meet that standard, then you may not be able to continue anyway, in which case you don't want to submit your DS260. The other way around of meeting that requirement is through work experience. The work experience requirement is based on the previous 5 years, just prior to your interview. The previous 5 years, you've got to have 2 years in an occupation, which in itself typically requires 2 years of education or training to perform at that level. Now, what does that mean? Essentially, they're looking for somewhat professional type jobs. If you've been a seamstress for 5 years, I'm sorry, that's not going to make it. So if you don't have the education and you don't have the work experience, then you may not be able to proceed. If you don't have the education but you have work experience, then the fact that you haven't got the education level needed doesn't matter. But the work experience has to be at a certain level and for a certain time. I'm going to include a link to a video and an article that I've created to explain the educational work experience requirement in more detail. And note that it is, as I mentioned, it's work experience or education, one or the other, not both. You don't have to satisfy both, you just need to satisfy one or the other as a requirement to entry. Okay, finally we get to the DS260. This is the first big step that you're going to take in your application process, right? So you fill in the DS260 and you go through a number of questions. You're going to need some basic information about yourself. You're going to need your passport. You might need a few other documents to help you fill that in. But I've written a step-by-step article, not a video for this one because it's a fairly in-depth process. So I've written a step-by-step article to help you answer some of the questions, or actually all of the questions, in the DS260. The point about the DS260 is be honest, be totally, brutally, absolutely honest, don't lie about anything, never ever lie to the US government. It's a stupid thing to do. And in your DS260 you're applying for immigration benefits, so you need to make sure you're honest and you answer the questions simply to the best of your abilities. So, you know, there'll be sections where you fill in your employment history and you tend to go with the current job, and then in a different section they might be asking for a previous employment. Same with education. They want you to go back in time to about the age of 12 roughly, to include all of the institutions that you attended, the schools or colleges that you attended through education, from at least around age 12. I get many people every year, every single year, I've been doing this years, every year someone said, oh, I didn't think it was important to fill in this information or that information. Yes, it's important. It's important you tell the truth and that you're transparent and you're open, that you show you know how to fill in a form and that you're not trying to, you know, hide some information. So it's important that you go through this process carefully and completely. So go through my article. The description to that one is below. The link to that article is below. And go through that carefully and take a bit of time. Don't rush it, okay? Don't make a mistake. If you've already submitted your DS260 or you find that your circumstances change, then you will be able to write to KCC and ask them to unlock your form so that you can correct it. But the previous information that you entered will always be available to the CO. So if you've made some stupid mistake based on a lie, you've already caused yourself a problem. So don't do that. Go through it carefully and honestly, okay? Please do that. Okay, then the last piece of interaction that you need to do before you get your interview will be sending your documents. You need to send in the documents that they ask you for. It's not all the documents that you can think of. It's a specific list of documents. You have to name those documents in a specific way. And you have to email a specific email address, which is slightly different to the normal KCC email address, and you need to include your case number in the subject line in a specific way. In other words, this is something you need to do accurately, and you need to do it, you know, according to instructions. Frankly, if you can't follow these instructions, then you probably shouldn't be thinking about emigrating to another country. It's as simple as that. But in any case, I've created an article which gives you absolute information, complete detail about what documents they're looking for, how you should present them, how you should name them, how you should construct the email, etc. There's really no excuse to get this wrong. But many people have got this wrong. And actually in DV2020, I'm quite certain that I'm going to see hundreds of cases where people think they've followed this procedure correctly and they're going to have a horrible wake-up call pretty soon to realize that they've actually messed up their opportunity of a lifetime because they didn't follow simple instructions. So it makes me so sad, and that's why I've been writing a blog for several years, and that's why I do these videos. But your ability to follow simple instructions is you know, an important skill that you've got to demonstrate to the US government right now if you want to be able to come to America. So, you know, so take this seriously, guys. Okay, so once you've done all those things, you've worked out that you didn't make any mistakes in your entry. you've checked to see whether you're eligible according to either education or work experience. You fill out your DS260, and within a few weeks after the DS260 you'll be sending in your documents, and you've done all of those things, right? And for the documents, by the way, you'll need some police certificates, so you won't fill those in and send them straight away. And for many of you, you should wait to send your documents anyway, because again, back to your case number, it's gonna take a while. But anyway, you've done all of those things. What happens then? Are you going to be interviewed? Well, only when your case number is current. Current meaning it's your turn, right? And you'll see when your case number is current according to the visa bulletin. I publish an announcement of that every month in my blog about what the case numbers are, etc. And I talk about that on the videos as well. So you need to make sure you're reading my blog, you make sure you're subscribed to my channel and turn the bell on, click the bell button to make sure you get notifications from me on the channel. That really is the best way that you can make sure your case is going to get processed correctly, because you're going to be following the information from me. So do all of those things, and you'll then wait until your case number is current, and at some point, which will happen between the 1st of October this year or up until September 30th of 2021, between those times, hopefully you'll get your interview. We don't know yet how many extra people they selected above the number of people they need. A lot of people will drop out during this process, so some people get denied, some people actually win the lottery but never apply, because they decided they just applied for the lottery and just for a bit of fun, but they didn't want to apply. They don't, when they think about winning, they don't want to move to America. Their circumstances have changed or something, or they get disqualified, or they get denied. So if in a typical year, instead of announcing to about 55,000 people that they are selectees, they probably typically they announce that to around about 100,000 people, and so there will be some people. Hopefully everybody gets the visa that wants it, but there could be some people that don't get the visa, and it'll be because the case numbers are cut off before the end. But the only time we're going to know that is in a few weeks' time, when we see the per country counts. That'll be released probably in the August visa bulletin, which is published in July. Most likely it's going to be published around then. It might be a little bit later this year because the process got delayed, obviously, for the pandemic. But in July, hopefully mid-July, we'll have the selectee counts, the numbers of people that have been selected around the world and for each country, and that will begin to tell us what the chances are for everybody to become current. And then in January of next year we'll have access to the actual data, all the case data. We're able to obtain that from the US government website, but it only is available from January the 1st each year, and so we obtain that, and that will give us more information. So it will be some months before we know everything, and even then it's a guessing game. The visa is not guaranteed until it's in your hands, and as people going through DV2020 will tell you, I will often tell people wait and see. I don't like giving predictions about what will happen, because frankly none of us knew. In January of this year, DV2020, we thought we knew what was going to happen. Then the pandemic came. So in February and March things started to go wrong. By the middle of March the embassies were closed. The travel ban for immigrants was introduced. We had, it's just a mess. A few months ago we had no idea any of this stuff was going to happen, and so DV2020 should be a massive lesson to everybody to understand that things can change very quickly, and nothing is sure until you've got that visa in your hands. Okay, so just to continue. yeah, don't pack your bags yet. You need to take your time, and the process will take some time to play out. Okay, so I hope this video is informative and interesting to you. As I said before, please make sure you're subscribed, turn on the bell notification, make sure you get all the updates from me as I send out information, and head over to my blog to get more information. Please read the FAQ, the frequently asked questions, and have a look at the articles that I'm going to draw your attention to in the description below. Those are the ones that you should be starting with now, and there are many things that you need to know about this process, but these are the main ones you need to know for now. Okay, hope that was interesting too. Alright, have a great day. Bye bye.